Gordon Whitfield had a habit of smiling when he shouldn't. The nurses had noticed it months ago. The slight upturn at the corners of his mouth whenever a complaint was filed. Whenever a shift ran short. Whenever someone below him made a mistake he could catalog. It was the smile of a man who collected other people's failures the way some people collect hockey cards. He was wearing it now. Before I tell you what he did with it, welcome to Steady Badge's Stories. If you believe the quietest person in a room sometimes carries the heaviest history, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where in Canada you're listening from tonight. I've heard from people in Halifax, from Winnipeg, from a truck stop outside of Kenora, and I would love to add your city to that list. Because this story starts in the kind of place most of us have sat in a waiting room at 3 a.m, hoping someone competent is on the other side of that curtain. Someone was, they just didn't know who she was yet. It was the second week of January, and the ice storm that had been threatening Thunder Bay since noon had finally arrived. Maya Sinclair stood at the charge desk of Northgate Regional Medical Centre's emergency department, with her hands in her pockets and her eyes on the ambulance bay doors. Bright blue scrubs, dark hair pulled back short enough to stay out of the way. She was 37 years old and had the kind of face that didn't announce anything. Pleasant, still. The sort of face people looked past when they were searching for someone in charge. Gordon Whitfield, Chief Operating Officer of Northgate Regional, looked past it now. The Whitefish Road pileup, he said to no one in particular, reading from his phone with his thumb scrolling. Trans-Canada at mile marker 61. Fire says 5 vehicles. 6 patients inbound. He looked up. The emergency department was 3/4 empty. Most of the afternoon shift had been redirected upstairs 2 hours earlier, where Whitfield's annual Health Leadership Summit, a $500 a plate dinner for hospital donors, was running behind schedule and needed warm bodies in scrubs to add what he called authentic medical atmosphere. Dr. Adrian Reeves had objected, Tanya, the charge nurse, had objected twice. Neither of them was in the room now. Whitfield's eyes moved across the near-empty ear and landed on Maya. She had said something at a staff meeting 3 weeks ago. Something about triage flow and response time, and the way the night shift was consistently left under-resourced. She had said it quietly, without drama, reading from a 2-page summary she'd prepared with footnotes. Whitfield had thanked her for her input, and filed it in the place where he filed all nursing input. He remembered her now. Nurse Sinclair, he said, loud enough that the 2 remaining residents at the far end of the department could hear. You're always talking about protocol, about efficiency, about how this department could run better. He spread his hands toward the ambulance bay. 6 patients. Let's see it. A first-year resident named Sienna looked up from her chart. Her expression said, "Is he serious?" Maya didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes were the color of lake ice in February, pale gray, very still. "Director Whitfield," she said, "what staff do I have?" "You, Sienna, and Marco." He gestured toward the ER tech at the medication station, a young man who had been on shift for 9 hours and was running on his 3rd coffee. "And I'll be here for oversight." "Oversight," Maya repeated. "Exactly," he smiled. "Go ahead." The ambulance bay doors opened at 9:04 p.m. with a noise like the storm had been waiting for permission. 6 stretchers, 4 minutes, paramedics calling vitals over each other like overlapping radio signals. Maya stood in the center of the bay and listened without moving. Trauma 1, male 50s, suspected spinal unconscious, oxygen saturation dropping. Trauma 2, female late 30s, chest trauma, conscious but deteriorating. Trauma 3, teenage boy, blunt head injury, combative. Trauma 4, elderly woman, crush injury to lower left side, shock. Trauma 5, young woman, 34 weeks pregnant, blood pressure critical. Trauma 6, child male, approximately 8 years old, alert but pale. "This isn't possible," Sienna whispered. "Bay 1 gets the spinal," Maya said. Her voice had changed. Not louder, flatter. The kind of voice that assumed people would follow because stopping to check would cost time nobody had. Bay 2, chest trauma. Bay 3, the teenager. Bay 4, the elderly patient. Bay 5, the pregnant woman. "Marco, you're with me in Bay 6, the child first." Nobody moved for exactly 2 seconds. Then Marco moved, Sienna moved, the paramedics moved. Whitfield stood near the charge desk with his arms folded. A resident beside him whispered something. He didn't answer. The child's name was Liam Kovacs. 8 years old, seat-belted in the back of the family SUV when the truck ahead of them lost control on black ice and spun sideways across 2 lanes. Liam had been awake when the paramedics cut him out. He was quieter now. Too quiet. Maya had seen quiet children before. She had learned to distrust them. Liam. She put 2 fingers under his jaw. He turned toward her slowly, like someone surfacing from deep water. His pupils were even. His abdomen was soft. His vitals were low normal. "Can you tell me your name?" "Liam," he said. "Good. Where does it hurt?" He pointed at his left ribs vaguely. She pressed there and he winced but didn't cry. She pressed the surrounding areas without rushing, watching his face more than her hands. "Is my mom here?" he asked. "Your mom is being looked after in another bay," Maya said. "She's with us." He nodded as if he'd decided to believe that. Children did that sometimes, made a decision to trust and then committed to it completely, without reservation. She had found it both the easiest and the hardest thing to witness. "Marco," she said quietly. "Warm blanket, repeat vitals every 3 minutes. Don't leave him." Marco nodded. He was 24 years old and had worked emergency for 2 years. He had never seen anyone triage 6 patients in 4 minutes without a clipboard. He was beginning to understand that the woman beside him was not what anyone had assumed. Whitfield appeared at the curtain. "Nurse Sinclair, Bay 2 needs attention." "I know," Maya said, stripping her gloves. "That's where I'm going." "You should have sent Sienna." "Sienna is managing Bay 3, the teenager is combative." "Then." "Director Whitfield." She looked at him for the first time without looking away. "Every time you stand in that doorway, I lose 45 seconds. She paused. "Please don't." Bay 2 was worse than the report had suggested. The woman's name was on her hospital bracelet, Rachel Kovacs, Liam's mother. Maya registered that without letting it move through her, the way you register weather when you're already outside. Rachel was 36, and her right lung was filling with blood she couldn't afford to lose. Her oxygen numbers were sliding. The chest drainage kit was on the shelf where Maya had restocked it herself 2 nights ago, at the end of a double shift, because the supply cabinet had been left half empty by the day team for the 3rd time in a month. She had filed a report about that too. Dr. Reeves arrived at 9:18, breathing hard from the stairwell. He had heard the radio call in his car, turned around, and driven back to the hospital in weather that had no right being driven in. "What do we have?" he said. Maya gave him the report on Rachel in 11 seconds, complete, nothing wasted. He stared at her for a moment, then "Who's in Bay 1? Male, 50s, potential C-spine injury, vitals marginally stable. Imaging is delayed, there's a power fault on the 2nd floor from the storm, the radiology elevator is locked." She pulled on fresh gloves. "Sienna has Bay 1. Sienna is a first-year resident. She's doing fine." Reeves looked around the department. "Where is everyone?" Maya said nothing, she didn't need to. He looked toward the charge desk, where Whitfield was now speaking quietly on his phone. Something in Reeves's expression shifted. Not surprise, exactly. The look of a man confirming what he had already suspected. "Tell me what you need," he said. She told him. Bay 4 held Agnes Burrows, 71, retired schoolteacher from Nipigon, crush injury to her left hip and pelvis from the initial impact. By all accounts, she should not have been conscious. She was not only conscious, she was watching Maya the way a teacher watches a student who has just said something unexpected. "You've done this before," Agnes said, not a question. Maya was adjusting the pressure cuff. "I've worked emergency medicine for 7 years, Mrs. Burrows." "That's not what I mean." Agnes's voice was strained but precise. "The way you move through this room. My late husband served in the forces for 22 years. You stand like him. Not like a soldier on parade. Like someone who has been cold and tired and responsible for other people's lives at the same time." Maya checked the blood pressure reading, 88/60. She adjusted the IV flow without responding. "You don't have to tell me," Agnes said. "I just wanted you to know that I see it." Maya looked at her then, just for a second. "Rest," she said. "Save the talking for when this is over." Agnes smiled through the pain. "Yes, ma'am." At 9:34 p.m. the lights went out. Not all of them. The storm had taken a transformer 3 blocks east, and the hospital's backup power came on in segments, bay by bay, each one flickering back to life like something deciding whether it wanted to bother. Bay 5 stayed dark for 11 seconds. The pregnant woman, her name was Diane Park, 31 years old, 34 weeks along, had been stable, marginally, the kind of stable that required watching every minute. In those 11 seconds, her monitor alarmed twice. Whitfield's voice carried from the hallway, "Transfer her. Get her to St. Joseph's." Maya was already inside Bay 5. "The highway is closed between here and the city. OPP has it blocked at the junction, she doesn't move." "You don't make that call." "I already made it." She reached for the portable ultrasound on the shelf. Battery at 31%. She took it. "Either help me or stand further back." Reeves appeared in the curtain. He didn't say anything. He stepped to the other side of the bed and put his hands where she told him. The ultrasound found a fetal heartbeat in 7 seconds. The room exhaled. Whitfield had stepped back. He was watching from a safer distance now. Not because he had listened, but because something in the room had shifted, and he felt it without understanding it. It was the silence of people who had started to follow someone. By 10:02 p.m., 5 of the 6 patients had been pulled back from the worst of it. Rachel Kovacs was breathing easier. The man from Bay 1, 53 from Uppsala, a farmer named Carl who had been driving into town for groceries, had been taken to radiology via the stairwell once the power fault partially cleared. The teenager from Bay 3 had calmed enough to give his name. Diane Park's blood pressure had steadied. Agnes Burrows had asked a resident for her reading glasses so she could check the clock. Liam was still in Bay 6. Marco had stayed beside him for the full hour. The boy's vitals had been acceptable for 50 minutes. Then they weren't. Maya. Marco's voice came through the curtain low and careful, the tone of someone who understood the weight of what they were saying. Something's changing. She was inside before he finished the sentence. Liam's blood pressure had dropped 8 points in 6 minutes. His skin was clammy. His gaze had gone somewhere slightly past the present moment. Liam, she took his face in both hands. Look at me. He turned toward her slowly. She checked his abdomen again. The left side had changed, not dramatically. Enough. Slow splenic bleed, she said. Missed on initial because he was compensating well. She looked at Reeves, who appeared in the doorway. He needs the oar. Surgery is still locked on the 3rd floor. Then unlock the 3rd floor. She was already issuing orders, warm fluids, pressure support, repeat ultrasound. Marco, don't stop talking to him. Marco leaned down. Hey buddy, I need you to stay with me, okay? We're going to settle the big debate. Are you a Leafs fan or a smart person? Liam almost smiled. Perfect, Marco said. Hold on to that. At 10:17 p.m., fire rescue brought in one more. Adult male critical. The paramedic, a tall woman named Ortega, still with ice in her hair, gave the report before the doors were fully open. Thomas Kovacs, 41. Driver of the family SUV Minutes. Significant chest and abdominal trauma, 2 pulse losses during extrication, BP absent on scene. We got something back, barely. He has a son inside. From Bay 6, Marco heard this. He did not tell Liam. Maya looked at the man on the stretcher, gray in the face, oxygen mask fogged with shallow breathing, one hand hanging slack off the edge of the board. She touched his wrist, a pulse, thin and far away, like a radio signal from somewhere over the tree line. Whitfield appeared behind her. He's a level 1, he goes upstairs. 3rd floor is still compromised. Then we call the air ambulance. In this weather. She said it without a question mark. The ceiling is 200 feet. No aircraft is flying tonight. Every paramedic in the bay knew she was right. Whitfield's voice tightened. You are not in charge of this hospital. Somewhere behind a curtain, Liam Kovacs said something too quiet to hear. Maya looked around the room. Reeves, Marco, Sienna, Ortega. 2 residents who had been watching from the hallway for 40 minutes and had stopped waiting for permission to be useful. She looked back at Whitfield. No, she said quietly, but I am in charge of this hour. Nobody contradicted her. They made a bay from the staff corridor. 2 rolling screens, 1 monitor, 1 stretcher wedged under the exit sign near the ambulance entrance. Reeves managed the chest trauma. Sienna established the line without being asked twice. Ortega stayed to assist. Maya kept one hand on Thomas's wrist and her eyes on the monitor. Your son is in Bay 6, she said. He is 8 years old and he is not done yet. If any part of you can hear that, I need you to stay. The monitor changed by 1 degree. Reeves looked up. Did he just? He responded to purpose, Maya said. Use whatever keeps them here. At 10:51 p.m., the surgical stairwell unlocked. A surgeon named Dr. Hanako Morris came down 3 steps at a time, still in her oar cap, furious about the elevator. She stopped at the bottom of the stairwell and looked out at the department. The bays, the boards, the patients alive on monitors that an hour ago had no reason to be. What is happening down here, she said. Reeves opened his mouth, then stopped. He looked at Maya. Dr. Morris followed his eyes. Maya gave the full report in 38 seconds. Every patient, every decision, every contraindication she had worked around and why. Morris was quiet for a moment. Who coordinated this? I did, Maya said. Whitfield stepped forward from the edge of the room. Under my supervision, I made the decision to delegate operational management to available nursing staff while maintaining command oversight. The room heard it. Every person in it heard the shape of what it was. Sienna looked at the floor. Marco looked at Whitfield. Agnes Burrows, who had somehow arranged to be wheeled near the bay entrance, looked at him the way she had once looked at students caught copying each other's work. Maya said nothing. She handed Morris the chart for Thomas Kovacs. He needs the oar now, she said. Agreed. Morris turned to the oar team. Move. From Bay 6, Liam's voice carried, Is that my dad? Marco was there before anyone else. He's going upstairs, Marco said. He made it here. Now the surgeons have him. Is he going to be okay? Marco looked at Maya. Maya looked at Liam. He's very hurt, she said. But your voice got to him. I told him you were here. His heart got stronger when I said it. Liam pressed his hands together in his lap. A moment passed, then, he heard me? I believe he did. At 11:06 p.m., the front entrance opened in a way that had nothing to do with ambulances. 2 people in Canadian Forces dress uniforms walked into the R. Behind them came a woman in a federal jacket carrying a sealed folder. The taller officer, a colonel, silver-haired, with the kind of face built by years of weather and decisions that could not be revised, stopped 11 feet from Maya and looked at her the way you look at someone you have been searching for, long enough that finding them is almost complicated. Whitfield stepped toward them. This area is restricted to. The colonel spoke past him, Warrant Officer Sinclair. The ER changed the way a room changes when a word lands exactly where it wasn't supposed to. Dr. Reeves said it very quietly, Warrant Officer. Whitfield blinked. She's a registered nurse. The woman with the federal folder opened it without hurrying. She is also a former Canadian Forces Search and Rescue Technician, certified SAR Tech, 9 years of service, 3 Arctic deployments, 2 national commendations, call sign Falcon. She turned a page. Operational lead on the Resolute Bay mass casualty evacuation. Further classified rescue operations redacted by order of National Defense. Sienna sat down on a stool. Marco said softly, "Oh." Agnes Burrows said from her position near the bay entrance, "There it is." Whitfield's voice went very careful. "I was not informed of this." Maya pulled off her gloves. "You weren't entitled to it." The colonel. Her name was Heather Drummond, and she moved through the room the way senior officers move when they have stopped performing rank and simply are it, stepped past Whitfield without looking at him. Her eyes moved across the department. 6 patients. 7 now, with Thomas in surgery. Every one of them alive. "All of them," she said. "For now," Maya said. Drummond's expression shifted by exactly 1 degree. Anyone who hadn't spent years watching people keep their faces still in difficult conditions wouldn't have noticed. In the field, we call that a victory before the paperwork arrives. Maya didn't smile, but something in her posture settled. The woman with the folder introduced herself as Special Agent Nadia Below, from the Office of Healthcare Accountability, attached to the Canadian Institute for Health Information. She was in Thunder Bay because Northgate Regional had been flagged in a national review. 6 unusual patient outcomes over 10 months. Delayed triage, cancelled consults, missing equipment. One of them was a 44-year-old woman who had waited 58 minutes for a cardiac consult because the ER had been shorted that evening for a donor event. She had not made it. Whitfield said, "Those cases were reviewed by risk management." "Your risk management," Below said. "By qualified. Who report to you?" She closed the folder. "We have warrants for administration, billing, all internal incident reporting, and tonight's security footage." Whitfield looked toward the camera above the charge desk. The red light was blinking. "The footage has already been secured," Below said. "All of it." He tried one more time, he always did. Whatever Nurse Sinclair's background, Whitfield said, to the room, to the camera, to whoever might be useful later, she acted beyond her scope tonight. Every procedure she performed will be reviewed. Every decision made without proper physician oversight. "Stop," said Reeves. Whitfield turned. Reeves had blood on his sleeve and nothing useful left on his face for Whitfield to work with. "She asked for physician oversight. I provided it. Everything she did with me present or in direct consultation." A pause. "And she's the reason I'm still here to say that." Whitfield's jaw tightened. Maya looked at him. "You left 6 patients in an understaffed emergency department to serve drinks at a donor dinner. Review everything you like. I kept documentation on all of it." She pointed at the charge desk. "Review the airway I supported in Bay 1 because respiratory was upstairs passing canapes. Review the chest drainage in Bay 2 because the thoracic resident was redirected before shift change. Review every patient who almost had no one in their bay." Her voice did not rise. "I hope the salmon was worth it." A resident near the corridor made a sound that was close enough to laughter. Whitfield pointed at her. "You concealed a military background from this institution." "I disclosed my nursing credentials. They were the relevant ones." Agnes Burrows raised one hand from her wheelchair. "Director." The voice of a woman who had managed 30 students in a classroom for 4 decades. "That's enough." The ER went quiet. Whitfield looked at her. She looked back without blinking. He did not speak again. At 1:47 a.m., Thomas Kovacs came out of surgery. Critical but stable, the bleed had been controlled. He would need more procedures, more time, but he was breathing without assistance. Rachel, moved to a monitored bay and largely stable, cried without sound when Reeves told her. Liam had been taken for a precautionary scan after his pressure scare. The splenic bleed had been minor enough, just barely, to manage without surgery. He came back down at 2:30 with a bandage on his hand where the IV had been and a stuffed moose someone from pediatrics had brought him. He asked to see Maya. She came. "Is my dad awake?" Liam asked. "Not yet, he will be. Marco says you told him about me when he came in." "I did." Liam held the stuffed moose against his chest. "Did he really hear you?" Maya looked at this boy, 8 years old, still in his admission bracelet, ice storm mud still on the knees of his pants from wherever the paramedics had found him. "I think some part of him did," she said. "I think some part of people always hears what matters." Liam nodded, slowly, the way children nod when they have decided to believe something and don't need arguing out of it. "Okay," he said. By 3 a.m, federal agents were in the administration wing. Whitfield's assistant, a woman named Carol who had spent 4 years watching him sign documents she was not comfortable watching him sign, produced copies of incident reports she had kept in a folder at her home address. She had been waiting for someone with the right warrant and enough jurisdiction. Whitfield was escorted out of the building at 3:18 a.m. He kept his head down. There was no one left to perform for. At the gathering near the charge desk, sometime around 6 a.m. when the day shift was beginning to filter in, and the ice storm had thinned to sleet, Reeves said the thing no one else had managed yet. "I knew something was wrong with how this place was being run," he said. "I said it in rooms where it didn't cost me anything and stayed quiet in the ones where it did." He looked at Maya. "You showed us what that quiet costs in the end." "I wasn't keeping quiet," she said. "I was filing reports." "I know." He didn't look away. "I should have signed them." She didn't argue. He knew it already, knowing it was the beginning of something. Tanya raised her coffee cup. To the nurse director Whitfield, left alone to fail. Marco raised his. Sienna raised hers. Reeves picked up a tongue depressor from the counter and raised that. Agnes Burrows, still in her monitored bay but positioned near the hallway because she'd told the night resident she needed air circulation, raised the cup of tea she had finally been brought. Maya looked at all of them. "Don't make me a symbol," she said. "What happened last night isn't a story about one person being exceptional. It's a story about what happens when a system is designed to protect itself instead of its patients." She looked around the room, at the faces that were tired and moved and still a little shaken. "The patients who are alive right now are alive because enough people in this room decided to follow when it mattered. That's the thing worth keeping." Colonel Drummond, who had stayed through the night and was standing near the entrance with a coffee she hadn't touched, met Maya's eyes across the room. Maya looked away first. 6 weeks later, a federal report named Northgate Regional Medical Centre in a healthcare accountability review covering 14 facilities across northern Ontario. Systemic understaffing, retaliatory conduct toward nurses who filed safety reports, fraudulent incident classifications, administrative interference in clinical triage. Whitfield pled no contest to 3 charges. The woman who had waited 58 minutes for a cardiac consult, her name went into the language of a new provincial patient safety standard, so that her death would mean something going forward and not simply disappear into a review memo. A new set of commitments went up above the charge desk at Northgate. No patient waits unseen. No staff member faces reprisal for raising a safety concern. No administrator overrides clinical triage. The 4th one Maya had not written. Someone put it up while she was off shift. No one is ever just a nurse. She looked at it for a long time when she came back. She didn't take it down. She also didn't comment on it, which Tanya said was basically the same as approval. Liam Kovacs visited in March during a follow-up appointment for his father. He was wearing a winter jacket with a wolf patch on the sleeve. He gave Maya a card made from construction paper and marker, slightly uneven letters, one corner folded wrong. It said, "Thank you for staying." She kept it behind the charge desk, tucked into the frame below the shelf, where the departmental guidelines lived. Reeves saw it one morning and said nothing. He pulled a chart from the rack, signed a form, and paused. "Resident orientation starts next month," he said. "I'd like you to lead the triage session." "I have a lot of opinions about triage protocol," Maya said. "I know." Something in his voice that wasn't quite a smile. "That's why I'm asking." She told him she would need 1 hour. He said that seemed to be enough time. Outside, the lake ice was beginning to break up, and the light over Thunder Bay was doing what it did in late March, coming in low and gold through the windows, making the ear look almost gentle. Maya Sinclair clipped her badge to her scrubs and walked back into the department. She had come to Northgate to be quiet, to be ordinary, to let the parts of herself that had seen too much take up less room. But silence, she had learned, was not the same as peace, and small, she had learned, was not the same as healed. She picked up the marker, she looked at the board. Baywana was waiting. She went to work. Thank you for listening to Steady Badge's stories. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who deserves to hear it, and leave a comment below telling me where you're from. I read every single one. I'll be back soon with another story about the people who carry more than they're ever given credit for. Until then, take care of yourselves and the people around you.